So in this video, I'm going to show you how to do a few application problems using the integral. And for these problems, we generally will find the value of c. So our first problem is given that c prime of x equals 3x squared minus 24x plus 53. Now, instead of saying c prime, sometimes in the problems, they just say marginal cost. Because remember, marginal cost is always the derivative of cost. Marginal revenue is the derivative of revenue. So it says find the cost function if monthly fixed costs are 30,000. And it gives you a hint that when x is 0, that is when I have my fixed cost. So when x is 0, we know that the cost is 30,000. So this is going to help us find our value of c. So because I want a cost function and we're given the derivative, my cost function is going to be the integral of my c prime function. And anytime I write it, I need to put the integral symbol and then the dx. So you should show this to show that you're taking the integral to find the original function. So then I'm going to take the integral of each individual term. So I add 1 to the exponent, so it becomes 3, and I divide by that new exponent. 24, and it would be x. If we don't write it, it's a 1. So 1 plus 1 is 2 over 2, and the integral of a constant is that constant times x, and then don't forget to put plus c. So we get x cubed minus 12x squared plus 53x plus c. So this is a general function for my cost function, but because they told me a specific point on the original graph, I can find c. So to do that, I plug 30,000 in for my cost, and I plug 0 in for my x, because that's the information I know. So when I do that, I get 30,000 equals, 0 cubed is 0, minus 12 times 0 squared is just going to give me 0, plus 53 times 0 is just going to give me 0. So this becomes 0 plus c, which is just c. Now, it doesn't always work out that c is equal to the value that they give you. So just make sure you are careful with that and don't assume that. But then my cost function, what I do is I plug in that specific value of c. So I'm going to put plus 30,000. And this is my cost function. Okay, so let's look at another example. Both of these examples are from the Unit 3 packet. So this one says monthly sales of an SUV are expected to decline at a rate of S of t equals negative 24t to the 1/3. Okay, anytime they say rate, it is indicating a derivative. Whether they put the derivative notation or not, it indicates a derivative. So we said the rate is S prime of t equals negative 24t to the 1/3 SUVs per month. The company plans to stop production when 600 SUVs. If monthly sales are now 1,200 SUVs at time t equals 0, how long will the company continue to manufacture this model? Okay, so I know a few things. I know that the derivative or the rate of change of SUVs is this function. And I know a point on the graph. I know when t equals 0, my SUVs are 1,200. So when t equals 0, we know S of t, or S, is 1,200 SUVs. So it says we want to figure out when the sales reach 300 SUVs. Okay, so I need to figure out a function for S of t to let S of t be 300 and then solve for t. So to do that, I have to take the integral of S prime of t to get S of t, which is the integral of negative 24t to the 1/3. And then I have to find my c, because I need a specific function in order to be able to actually solve for t when the SUVs are 300. Okay. And don't forget your dt. I'm using t instead of x because my function is in terms of the variable t. So always match d, and it should be whatever letter you're using for your variable. Okay, so if I take the integral of this, I'm going to write this one all out since I have a fraction. I would have 1/3 plus 1, and then I'm going to divide by 1/3 plus 1. Okay, now, and then, sorry, plus c, don't forget that. Now, you can use your calculator, or if you do this by hand, when I add fractions, I have to get a common denominator. So 3 or 1 is the same as 3/3. And so this would become 1/3 plus 3/3. When you add fractions, you only add the numerators and you keep the denominator. So it'd be 4/3. And that's what the denominator would give me. And right, if you remember, when you divide by a fraction, it is the same thing as multiplying by the reciprocal. So again, to simplify this, it's fine to do in your calculator -24 divided by, but then you want the 4/3 in parentheses if you're doing this in your calculator. So you get -18. If you're doing it by hand, what you're doing is you multiply by the reciprocal. So you take -24 and you multiply by this fraction flipped, which is 3/4. And then if you do that, you can either put this over 1 and multiply across, or you can reduce. So you would multiply -24 times 3, which is -72, and then over 4. Okay, and you get the same thing that we did with the calculator. So -18 t to the 4/3 plus c. I would just recommend doing it in your calculator because it's a lot faster. So I'm going to label this as s of t because we want this as a function of t, of s, sorry, s of t to be a function of t. And then we need to find our c value. We need a particular function because they gave us our point. And if we come back, my point was 0, 1200. So I'm going to plug 1200 in for s of t. And then I'm going to plug 0 in for t. Okay, and again, 0 to any power is just 0. So this is 0 times -18, which is 0. Again, you could, in your calculator, if you're not sure, do 0 raised to the 4/3, but you get 1200 equals c. So my particular function, and a particular function is the one where we have the c value, is -18t to the 4/3 plus 1200. Now, if we go back to the question specifically asked, how long will the company continue to manufacture this model? And it says they stopped production when it reached 300 SUVs. So I need to find t when s of t is equal to 300. So I'm going to plug 300 in for s of t, and then I'm going to solve this equation. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is move the 1200 that's being added. Okay, and 300 minus 1200 is -900. Okay, then I can divide both sides by -18. And I get 50 equals t to the 4/3. And then to get rid of a 4/3 exponent, you raise it to the reciprocal. So you would take t to the 4/3 and you would raise it to the 3/4 on both sides. And again, the reason is when you raise an exponent to an exponent, you multiply. So if you multiply this out, you would get like 12 over 12, which is just 1. So this just gives me t to the first, or t, and then you would do 50 to the 3/4. Sorry, that's hard to read. And if you want to change it to a root, you can, but the easiest way is just do 50, put the caret, and then type in 3/4. And we get 18.8. On the answer key, they did 1 decimal place, so I'll just do that. 18.8. And they said for this problem, if we look for the units, they talked about the SUVs per month. So our time is in terms of months. So this would be 18.8 months is approximately how long. And usually when we round, instead of putting equals, we just put the little squiggles because that means approximately. So those are 2 application problems where we're using the indefinite integral to find our original function. And then on this one, we went a step further and we solved for our t value for a specific value of SUVs. So just let me know if you have any questions on these.